Welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where we discuss amazing books written by talented authors. For Book Lovers Only Live Radio is a proud member of the Village Connector Media Network. If you love books, we have a home for you. Now time for your host and chief book lover, Rob Brown.
Hello and welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover. Hoping that you're having a great week. We are super excited today. We'll be interviewing Reverend Dr. Michael W. Waters about his captivating book, Stakes is High, Race, Faith, and Hope for America, that we'll be discussing with him shortly. Before we begin, I want to let book lovers, and in particular authors who may be watching our broadcast, know about the Texas Authors Incorporated. It's a nonprofit organization out of Austin, Texas, which is designed to help Texas authors better market and sell their books. Alan Bourgeois is the founder of Texas Authors, Inc., and via his invite, I had the distinct pleasure of speaking at their author marketing event in July of 2017. It was absolutely phenomenal. I had a great time. I met some really talented authors there, Becky Willis, who's appeared on our show, Grace Allison, who will be on our show soon, Sherry Masonave, who will also be on our show, and Dr. Michael Farlow, who was on our show a few weeks ago, amongst others. I learned quite a bit myself about marketing and even earned my author marketing certificate while I was there. It's a great organization, and if you're an author, you should seriously consider attending their next author marketing event. It's going to be July 27th through the 29th in 2018 in Dallas, Texas, at the Dallas Marriott Las Colinas. I guarantee if you're an author, you will gain tremendous value from the awesome lineup of speakers presenting there. I'm probably going to be speaking there again, along with other industry experts, to help you sell more books. It's also a great way to network and build relationships with other authors. Visit texasauthors.com to learn more about the organization. That's txauthors.com and 2018.authors.marketing to get registered for next year's marketing event. It is truly a worthwhile investment, and you'll be glad you did. And afterwards, you'll definitely be looking forward to attending in 2019. Now, time for today's guest. He is an author, pastor, professor, activist, community leader, and social commentator. Now, I first met him when he was a speaker at an annual conference at my church in Fairfax, Virginia in 2017. I was really impressed with his thoughts, his opinions, and when I learned that he was an author, I knew I had to invite him onto our show. Reverend Dr. Michael Waters founded the Joy Tabernacle African Methodist Episcopal Church in Dallas. It's one of the fastest growing AME churches in the great state of Texas. He's an alumnus of Southern Methodist University in Dallas and holds bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees with honor from that esteemed institution. He shared his insights on such shows as ABC Nightline, CBS This Morning, NBC Nightly News, and the PBS NewsHour, amongst others. His book, Stakes is High, Race, Faith, and Hope for America, blends hip-hop lyricism and social justice leadership, creating an urgent voice, demanding that America listen to the suffering if it hopes to redeem its soul. Weaving stories from centuries of persecution against the backdrop of today's urban prophets on the radio and in the streets, Dr. Waters speaks on behalf of an awakened generation raging against racism, yet fueled by the promise of a more just future. And he'll be joining us in just a few moments.
Michael Waters.
Pastor Waters, hi, this is Rob Brown with For Book Lovers Only Live Radio. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being on our show. As we begin, I wanted to delve into your background a little bit. Are you originally from Texas?
I am. Our family has been in Texas for several generations. I've recently spent some time. My mother is a family historian, but I've picked up on some of her work and have continued to consider our family narrative. And so we had individuals migrate into Dallas is forced immigration, if you will, part of it in
Hmm.
terms of the legacy of slavery. But some who came with slave masters from Alabama, fleeing the Civil War, as many slave owners did, seeking to come to Texas to maintain their slaves. I have family who came from North Carolina immediately following the Civil War on my mother's side, and then on father's side, Strand, that came down from Ohio. But we've been in Texas now since the mid 19th century, and so several generations of Texans have come of age here, and I'm I guess the next chapter in that story of our family.
Now, you have one of the fastest growing churches in Texas. Where did you get your calling to start your church?
Well, I don't not so much in Texas, but for sure for our denomination, the AME Church, we've been blessed to be the first successfully established new church plant in the Dallas area in about 50 years, and so we're very grateful for what God is doing here. I discerned the call to ministry at a very young age. I was 11 years old when I first discerned the call to ministry and began actively preaching about the age of 16, 17 years old. But again, in terms of my family narrative, I am a fifth generation ordained minister in AME Church. Mother and father are ordained ministers. Great grandmother, great 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 grandfather, uncles, cousins, aunts who have served the church and continue to serve the church well. So among a multiplicity of professions ranging from education as professors all the way to elementary age teaching to those who've been in politics, elected officials, business, and even athletics and the arts. Ministry really in service has been a very focal part of our family. And so in a very similar sense, I believe that I'm just a part of that ongoing narrative of work and service.
And when did you start writing?
Goodness, that's a very compelling question. I've always, stayed very close to a pen and paper. I journaled a little bit when I was growing up, not too consistently, but there were these moments, times where I would write. I tended to lean heavily in school to writing intensive courses because writing, to some extent, came easy for me. But in terms of publication, really, I think my first piece was published as a seminarian, and it was a research paper. And most times, things I published while in school were, research papers and the like. I think the way in which people know my writing now evolved a little bit later as the advent of blogging really began to move forward. And I was invited to begin writing a religion column for a hyperlocal publication called Dallas South News. They asked me to write for them, and I did that for a couple of years and had gained a good following from those pieces. And then a organization in D.C. asked that I would write a piece for them that was only going to go, or supposedly was only going to go on their website, and I did, and they liked it enough to where they shared it with the Huffington Post. And this was at the time where you had to be invited as a writer to write for the Huffington Post. It's much more democratic now, but at that time you had to know someone on the inside or something of that nature to have your articles published. And so they submitted to the Huffington Post, and not only did the Huffington Post carry that article, but they then invited me to have, if you will, my own column or platform on the Post. And that, I guess, began a whole new story in my life of sharing and writing regarding things that were of concern to me in the world.
And what was your primary motivation for writing Stakes is High?
I think that, like many Americans, I recognize that the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama, while it was a historic presidency, did a lot to reveal the very ugly and ongoing legacy of racism in America, things that we still had not yet addressed. I thought about W.E.B. Du Bois' declaration in his 1903 book, Souls of Black Folk, where he said that the color line would be the main issue of the 20th century. And here we were several years into the 21st century, and it seems like the color line, the issue of racism, was once again dominating the headlines. And so Stakes is High is processing this racialized moment in American history with the backdrop of the Obama presidency, as well as at the time of the writing, the rise of the Trump candidacy, and ultimately the election of President Trump, and how all of these things that happened during this period of time serve to fan the flames or to reveal, to expose just how high the stakes are for all Americans, in fact, for the world, as relates to finally dealing with this legacy of racism. So Stakes is High seeks to really shine a light on several issues of concern, but at the end of the day, hopefully point to the opportunity of a brighter and more hope-filled future.
Absolutely. And this is probably one of the most powerful books that we have ever profiled on the show. And I want to dive in. One of the first chapters of your book is titled Black Life is Expendable, where you discuss the deaths of Eric Garner, John Crawford, and Michael Brown. And I want to quote from this chapter: "Mine is not an indictment of all police officers. There are many men and women who put their lives on the line for the public good each day. Some I have been blessed to call mentor or friend." Then you go on to say, "Unquestionably, there is cause for great concern, as I believe a critical mass of law enforcement officers finds Black lives expendable." Why do you believe there's a critical mass of these officers and not just, like, let's say, a tiny percentage of rogue officers out there who find Black lives expendable?
I think it's more deeply ingrained within American society than we would like to admit. I believe that there are things at work even within the subconscious of police officers and others that causes them to see, to identify Black humanity as an inherent threat. And when you look at the legacy of racism and how it has been shared through various forms of media, the various mediums over centuries, that's not a hard declaration to make. There was a study several years ago, which I quote in the book, that showed that most police officers, when they view an adolescent Black male, they add anywhere between 3 to 4 years on top of that individual's age. So literally, a 10-year-old becomes a 14-year-old, a 14-year-old becomes an 18-year-old, and then now you get a glimpse of why we have so many fatal encounters with such young men and women with police officers, is because when they view these individuals, they add a level of age and maturity, which then ascribes to that individual a level of threat. And so I believe that the statistics show that there's something very unique that happens between these encounters, between particularly Black men and women and children and the police officers. And I think it is a large enough issue to where we must demand a national police reform, and we must also demand that the criminal justice system undergo some reformation as well.
I see. Now, I thought in reading this book, I thought you did a great job of weaving popular culture into the message, from quoting Public Enemy lyrics to discussing one of your favorite movies of all time, Return of the Jedi, which, on a sidebar, I'd be very interested to get your opinion on the new Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi, but that's conversation for another day.
Sure.
Yeah. In the book, one of the chapters appears to be someone talking to President Obama, if I understand this, and telling him to know his place. Navigate us through that a bit. What were you trying to convey to the reader there?
Sure. I feel that much of the opposition that President Obama experienced was race-related. and in fact, much of it dealt with racism. And I believe it served as a way to say you may be the president, but you're still a biracial man, self-identifying as African American. You're still there's still a place for you, and that comes from the history of Black masculinity, in particular in America, where you would have grown men, even elderly men, who were referred to as boy, largely by white men and women, and never called by their name, never affirmed as Mr. With their last name. And that serves psychologically to reinforce to these individuals, to our ancestors, to my ancestors, that there's a place for you in the society, and that's not as a citizen with rights. That's not as someone created equally in the image of God. There is a place for you. And so when you had the egregious instances of racism that happened with President Obama, from the caricatures that were shared by elected officials, from the governor in Arizona meeting the President Obama, on the tarmac and pointing and wagging her finger in his face, to being yelled out, "You lie," in the midst of State of the Union address. And I can go on and on and on and on and on. All these things start to remind him that you should know your place. Let us remind you of who you are in the American enterprise. And so I thought that was an important chapter to include and invite the reader into that experience to really ask the question, why did he receive the level of opposition that he received in the way in which he received it? And I do believe that much of the opposition received was racialized.
Now, your book also discusses Muhammad Ali. He completely transcended the sport of boxing through his dedication to racial and social justice throughout his life, but particularly in the 60s and 70s. In light of a country that appears to be more polarized and divided by the day, how can we view Ali's work and his legacy with a new perspective through the lens of 2018?
I appreciate the question. Actually, interestingly enough, about 2 weeks ago here in Dallas, a good friend and brother who I co-chair, Faith Forward Dallas, organization that fights for peace and justice within our community, he hosted a tremendous program called Seeds of Greatness. And one of the guests of honor was Rashida Ali, daughter of Muhammad Ali. And he asked me to read the chapter From Stakes is High on Muhammad Ali to the sold-out crowd, the sold-out banquet of individuals. And after reading from the chapter and sharing the book with her, I've been humbled to hear from her and have her share that as she continues speaking and traveling around the country discussing the legacy of her father, that she will be reading excerpts from this chapter, because she believes it provides a very clear picture of who her father was and what he contributed then. And one of the things I believe we can glean from the life of Muhammad Ali today is his truth-telling, okay? I think that in this, postmodern kind of subjective truth, alternative truth era that we live in, those who would dare to be truth tellers actually move us more closely to being a healed and redeemed society than those who do not tell the truth, regardless of what that non-truth telling might be. For some, it is literally an intentional desire to paint a picture that is different from reality. Mm-hmm. And so there are persons who would say that there is no racism in the world anymore, and there's no racism in America. And we need truth tellers to say that's absolutely not the case, that racism moves far beyond simply speaking to someone a racial epithet or a colored only side, and also speaks to systems within society does not give everybody a fair shake. I think that Muhammad Ali's main contribution was that he was such a bold truth teller. In the Vietnam War, as it waged on, part of his articulation to America is, why would I go 10,000 miles across the world to engage in an unjust war in the name of freedom and liberty, and I don't have freedom and liberty here. My people don't have freedom and liberty here. And tell you the truth, there's no one over in Vietnam that has ever called me out of my name, although there are fellow Americans here who do that on a daily basis. So I think that, and I hope to have accomplished this in the book, Stakes is High. I believe that those who would dare to tell the truth actually fulfill the hope of Scripture, which is that the truth shall set us all free. And it is imperative in this day that we gain strength from persons like Muhammad Ali. Now, the reality is, truth-telling does come at a cost. And although his sacrifice, his courage is celebrated today, we know that then, because he was a truth-teller, he was stripped of his belt, and even in the prime of his boxing life, was unable to continue within the profession. Nonetheless, regardless of what comes from it, I believe we have really a divine call to be truth tellers, and I think Muhammad Ali is emblematic of that reality.
What has the overall reception been of Stakes is High? Have you been getting a lot of feedback? What have people been saying about your book?
It's been an amazing journey to share the book and to hear others as they have considered the book. And I've heard from a diversity of people across the world, multiplicity of backgrounds, who have approached the text and have been faithful to share what they've learned with me. I've heard from white pastors who are now utilizing the book within their congregation, saying that, you know what, we can only truly be the church if we come into a true understanding of what our fellow brothers and sisters have experienced and continue to experience. And they have very boldly and courageously challenged their congregation, some in very affluent areas, to reconsider their notions of race in America and their role and responsibility of working towards peace and justice. I've heard from Muslim men and women who are facing all type of hostilities directed at them today, who have found strength in the narrative that has arisen from Black people in this nation over many centuries in terms of how to continue to move forward in the face of great oppression. The book is being used in graduate and undergraduate courses. It's been amazing just to see where it has popped up and whose hands it's popped up. I know I've shared it with Van Jones, and very grateful to have also interviewed with him. Others have. It's amazing where the book is finding itself. And even now, the book came out in February. Now it's going into public libraries. I know San Francisco Public Library now has copies of Stakes is High. Duke University has copies of Stakes is High. Yale University, spoke with the bookstore there. They have copies, and they share the book with others as they move around to different book signings and to on their book displays and all those type of things. So it's just been an amazing journey. And even as we are looking to 2018, more and more groups are asking, now that they have considered the book as a part of their book club or their curriculum or their work as a church, they're asking me to come in now and to also share with them directly concerning the book. So it's been an important experience. I think possibly, though, the commentary that has meant the most to me has been from individuals whose family members may be represented in the pages of these what are at times painful texts. So to hear from family members who lost loved ones in the massacre at Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina, who tell me the importance of his words. When I shared the chapter of Sandra Bland with her mother, who has rightfully so been very guarded concerning the narrative of her daughter, for her to come back and say, yes, I appreciate this work and I'm thankful that it's being shared with the world. To hear from Rashida Ali, to hear from Ambassador Shabazz, Malcolm X's daughter, who was also there, because I have a reflection in some of the pages on Malcolm X, and to hear her words of endorsement, to hear have some lesser-known individuals who lost loved ones, police brutality, that are represented within the pages of the text. And when they say, thank you for telling our story, thank you for keeping the name of our loved one alive, I don't think that there's any greater reward than to know that they've received in such a positive way.
Wow, that is so powerful. That is amazing. Now, after a person reads Stakes is High, they digest it, they think about it, pray on it, meditate on it. What would you suggest that their first step be in contributing to making America great again?
Sure. Well, it's a wonderful question, and let me kind of unpack the question. I think America is always aspiring to live into the promise of its greatness. Mm-hmm. I'm very mindful of the fact that, you know, what some people would esteem as a great period has been horrific for many others. And I think that's part of the invitation of Stakes is High, is to really move outside of your comfort zone and to invite yourself to listen to others and their experiences so that you can be transformed and so that you can then be empowered and inspired to work alongside those fighting for justice. And so after one has engaged Stakes is High, I hope it provides them at least with a new lens or an expanded lens which to view not only the history of America, but the current state of affairs. But then, as I say in the book, there's somebody who's waiting on you. There's somebody who's working now that has been looking for you to join alongside them in the struggle to make our country a better country, a greater country for all people. And so many times you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think a lot of people are discouraged, or they feel that it's almost daunting to begin the process because they believe they have to start from scratch. When I promise there is somebody somewhere who's probably been working for a long time that's looking to hand the baton off, looking for someone to stand beside them, looking for someone to help lift up their arms in this work. So I encourage in the book that you begin to explore, you know, what personally do you feel called to work towards? Because in reality, we can't do everything, but there's something that we might be particularly gifted to do or inspired to do. Then identify those persons in your community who are doing that work. And then after you've had an opportunity to vet and consider the work they're doing, then join them in whichever ways you can join them in the midst of the struggle.
That is absolutely wonderful advice for our viewers and our listeners, and I'm sure right now that they are interested in learning more about Stakes is High and learning more about you. I want to make sure that everyone has your contact information. Your website is michaelwwaters.com. They can follow you on Twitter at Reverend Dr. Mike Waters and Facebook, Michael W. Waters. Pastor Waters, thank you so much for stopping by here and chatting with us about Stakes is High. We look forward to staying in touch, and for other books that you're going to be writing in the future, we'd love to invite you back on our program again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was my great honor to share with you and your listeners.
Take care. Thank you. Stakes is High, Race, Faith, and Hope for America is available on our website for purchase. You want to pick up a copy today. This is a very, very powerful book. I guarantee you when you read it, you won't be the same. And speaking of our website, we have a new look and are better than ever. Please visit us at www.forbookloversonly.com and see and feel our new look and our functionality for both book lovers in search of new books and for authors who are looking for greater exposure for their books. Now, if you're a book lover but haven't yet joined our Book Lovers Club yet, we invite you to do so. It's simple. Just text the word book to 301-321-8887, and then you'll receive a message with the link. Click on the link and then fill in the form and then click sign me up, and you're automatically a member. We're going to be having contests for members only where you can win free books, coffee mugs, t-shirts, gift cards to your favorite coffee shop, and much, much more. We look forward to welcoming you soon. We're out of time, but be sure to stop by next time and join us when we interview more authors about amazing books. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover, and this is For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. Take care. I'll see you next time.